Hello, friends.
The Bears are who we thought they were.
The Bears. The Bears.
I am the great Cornholio.
We'll see what happens.
Playoffs?
See, Sean McDonough, Jay Billis. Goats.
Can you play a song? Something cool. Put my mic on!
I'm calling both games.
Oh, baby!
Are you serious?
Goes down the field for Smith.
Oh, he got it!
See how we're getting ready for Cincinnati.
Let's get back to the show. This segment we're talking about more thoughts on the Big 12, and my thoughts from the Big 12 last week weren't very popular. But I don't care. Whatever. My opinion, your opinion, everybody has a right. Or maybe not anymore. I don't know. But so last week, my thoughts on the Big 12 were initial thoughts, like my very firsthand, off the cuff thoughts, because I was sitting here on the show, and I had a notification on my phone. I said, "Oh, what's that?" And it said, the Big 12 invited Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF to the Big 12 to fill the gap from the teams that have left over the years. And I gave my initial thoughts because all these thoughts came to my head, and I said, boom, there we go. Let's just get that out there. And, some people are like, oh, you're just saying what ESPN says. No, there's no TV in the studio. I'm not listening to ESPN while I'm doing the show. I'm not watching ESPN while I'm doing the show. So that's not it. But anyway, I was sitting in my room this week, and I was thinking about what I want to talk about for the show, and I just couldn't get over this Big 12 thing because, no matter what has been said about these teams that have been invited, I'm not seeing how this makes the Big 12 any better. And so people said, oh, they can compete in a Power 5 schedule because they've had success in games against them. And all right, I guess I can understand that. And for these teams, right, UCF, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati, it's easy to rule that conference schedule when you've got one or two tough games in your conference, and then maybe if you're lucky, you have a tough Power 5 matchup. And in the American Athletic Conference in football, other than UCF and Cincinnati and Houston, right, and even Houston hasn't been good every year, and UCF hasn't been good every year, right, and Cincinnati hasn't been good every year. Like, every team has had their years, but other than those three teams, right, so if you're looking at UCF, you say, oh, we're playing Cincinnati and Houston, those are our top two toughest, our two toughest games of the year. The only other team that I can think of that has been tough is Memphis, right? So now out of what is it, usually like an 8 or 9 game conference schedule, out of 8 or 9 games, you've got 3 tough opponents, and maybe Tulsa's tough every 3 years. Maybe Temple has a good run every 4 years. But when you play 12 games, 8 or 9 against your conference, 3 of them are tough, and 3 of them are against other good teams in the conference, and you have 1 game against Texas or Auburn or Wisconsin or whatever, or Michigan, right? Any Power 5 team in the non-conference schedule. It's easy to, because look, so that's 4, right? 4 games out of 12. So the other 8, we assume that you win. So you're 8. So worst case scenario, you're 8-4, right? And that's looked at as a good year. So people are saying, "Oh my God, look at their records over there. They've been really good, right?" But it's easy to win 8 games against cupcakes and then take 2 out of 4 against tougher competition, and then you say, "Oh, we're 10-2. What a year!" But there's a reason why those teams they have a good year, and they're not considered for the college football playoff because they have a weak schedule, right? And if any team who wins 10 games is worthy of being a Power 5 team, then let's just invite them all in, right? I think it'll be interesting to see how these teams will fare against an entire regular season slate of Power 5 competition. Obviously it's going to be more difficult, but I understand that there's going to be tough teams in every conference, or every conference. Or I'm sorry, there's going to be bad teams in every conference, right? Kansas football hasn't been good since I don't know when. Oklahoma State has had their years. Iowa State is just getting good again. So like I said, the Big 12 is not a conference in football where every team is tough, and every conference is like that, right? Like every conference has their bad teams. Every conference has the team that everybody beats up on. So I'm not saying that it's going to be a tough game every week of the season for BYU or Houston or whoever. But I just think it's going to be interesting to see how they play against that, against a whole season or whole regular season of Power 5 competition. And there's been the point made that these teams have made a lot of New Year's Six Bowls. Well, of course they have, because when you win your conference, when you win the American Athletic Conference, you get that bid to a New Year's Six Bowl most of the time. And it's like I said, the conference is not tough to win. All you have to do is beat out Memphis, Houston, and Cincinnati if you're UCF, right, or any of the other three. All you got to do is it's essentially a 4-team playoff from those teams, and maybe Memphis every few years, right? But it's not like they've ran the SEC gauntlet, and it's like, oh my God, they've done that every year. They won the American Athletic Conference championship. So what? What are we really putting that much emphasis on that? Are we really putting that much importance on beating Temple and Tulane and South Florida and let's see, who else is in the American Athletic? I'm blanking on it, but like, are we really putting that much emphasis on beating those teams? Really? Because there's some good teams in the American Athletic Conference, don't get me wrong, but what is there to say, oh my God, this is an elite conference? It's not there. And I understand taking teams that have succeeded in that conference and putting them in a Power 5 conference because they've done well, but I don't know. I'm just not crazy about it. It's just where I'm coming from. Again, like I said, it's easy for Central Florida, UCF, in their dominant years to run the American Athletics slate when they've beaten Temple, UCF, Tulane, and 2, maybe 3 tough conference games, and then the championship. Right? That's not hard. That's not difficult. That just, I don't know. It's not enough for me. And this past week, people are saying, oh my God, BYU, right? They're in the top 25. They beat Utah last week. Okay, that's one game. It's a rivalry. Of course they're going to get up for that game. They're playing at home, a night game in a rivalry. I even said on the show last week I thought they were going to win. Just because they beat one Power 5 team doesn't mean that I think they should be a Power 5 conference team. Even before that game, they were like 0-4 in the last 4 games or something against Utah. There's another point. They're 7-1 against Texas and OU combined all time. So what? That's 8 games against the 2 teams that have dominated the Big 12 over the past 10 years, right? How many times did they play Texas or Oklahoma when they weren't good? How many times did BYU beat them up when they weren't good? And even if they were good when they beat them, right? So let's just say, for sake of argument, you played BYU or you played Texas in the 80s, right? And Texas maybe was good, right? What does that have to do with now? What does that have to do with 2023 or 2025 or whenever those teams are gonna join? What is beating Texas and Oklahoma combined 7 times? That's 8 games against 2 teams combined. But maybe if they went 20-3 against Texas, right? Or they, maybe if they beat up on those teams every single time they played them, or and it was a lot, right? Or maybe if they beat a Power 5 team by 20 points, 5 straight times or whatever, and they were just absolutely if they were absolutely crushing Power 5 teams every time they played them, maybe I'd have a different perspective. But okay, you beat Texas and Oklahoma 8 times combined. So what? Congratulations. You want a medal? You want a trophy? What does that have to do with the future, right? How many times, like I said, how many times did they beat them when they weren't that good? How many times did, you played them what? The 90s, the 80s, whatever? I don't care if you played them 20 years ago. I don't care if you played them 15 years ago, 10 years ago. What does that have to do with 3 years from now? What does that have to do with right now? I just don't think it does have anything to do with right now. Houston, the last time they were giving Power 5 teams a run for their money was what, 3-4 years ago? I mean, they've got a decent coach right now. I think so. No, I think they fired that guy, right? The Texas guy, and I think they've got somebody else. But in my opinion, Houston is overrated right now. And that's them being overrated in the American Athletic Conference. They're going to get to the Big 12, and then I really think they're going to be overrated. Cincinnati, their football program right now is yes, sure, they're in the top 10. When's the last time they've done that? Right? And I don't know who they've beaten. Who have they beaten to prove that they're a real top 10 team? I'm waiting. No? Okay. They play Indiana this weekend, right? Indiana was top 25 to begin the year, but Iowa took them to the woodshed. Cincinnati just, sure, just like any other team, they have a good year every now and then. But here's my point. The argument is, BYU and Houston have had good years, and they've beaten Power 5 teams before. So what about other teams that have done that? Boise State, let them in. San Diego State, let them in. Sure, okay. Hey, Boise State beat Michigan 10 years ago. Let them in. Western Michigan was undefeated 5 years ago. Let them in. Let them be a Big 12 team. Memphis, they won the American Athletic Conference a few times. Let them in. Like saying, they've beaten Power 5 teams before. I don't know if you realize how stupid that sounds. Because, okay, so Montana State or whatever just beat Washington last week or 2 weeks ago. Are we saying they should be a Power 5 team? Right? And I understand that these teams in BYU and UCF, right? I understand that they've had a few years, they've had a stretch where they've been good. But, okay. Great, good for them. What does that mean? What having a good stretch, does that mean we should just let any team who has a good stretch be a Power 5 team? Right? I mean, I just don't see the argument there. And let's see what else. Temple had a few good years. They were top 25 a few years ago. Let them in, right? No. Northern Illinois was top 25 in 2014. Well, let them be a Power 5 team. Realize how you start. Hopefully, you understand how weird this sounds. How kind of dumb this sounds. Coastal Carolina. Hey, they're top 25 this year. They beat Kansas by 20. Let them be a Power 5 team. Let them in. Louisiana, they kept it close with Texas. That's good enough. Let them be a Big 12 team. So saying that they've beaten big Power 5 teams in the past. Okay, congratulations. What do you want, a medal? I don't understand. They're 7-1 against Texas and Oklahoma all time. Go cherry pick another stat. Who else have they beaten 7-1? Who else do they have a 7-1 record with all time? So I just don't get it, right? I mean, are we gonna say every time a team has a good stretch, every time they do that, are we gonna say that they should be a Power 5 team? Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're gonna do every single time? Nevada, I think they were top 25 a few years ago. Let them be a Power 5 team, right? I mean, if that's your argument. I guess you could make the argument for every team in college football. Make the whole thing a Power 5. Make it a power FBS, right? I mean, there's a reason why we have Power 5 and not Power 5. Power 5 is supposed to be for the best of the best, typically. And again, we have teams that aren't in the Power 5 teams. We have teams that aren't good, right? We have teams that are not the best. But I mean. The argument, I'm just not seeing it. they've made New Year's Six bowls. Well, somebody's going to make that New Year's Six bowl. Somebody's going to. Somebody's going to get that at-large New Year's Six bowl. That's how it's designed so that one of them gets it. Like, okay. I'm just not saying the argument. The argument needs more for why they like BYU. Maybe I can understand. UCF, okay, but Cincinnati, they're top 10. Let them in. Like Cincinnati, Houston is where I'm saying, okay, I don't know about all that. BYU, I can get behind. UCF, okay, all right, I get it, I understand it, but I mean, okay, last week Jacksonville State just beat Florida State. Are we gonna say that they should be a Power 5 team now? Toledo kept it close with Notre Dame. Let them in, right? Let them in. Just let anybody in, right? And so I talked about the football side of things, but I want to talk about the basketball side of things, right? Look at the Big 12 basketball. Baylor's been really good lately, and Kansas is a blue blood school, right? They're always good. They're always going to be. They're always going to give you a fight. They're always going to be good. And Texas and Oklahoma have been decent, right? They've had their years for sure. Texas has been really good, right? But that doesn't matter. They're leaving. You know, we can talk about Texas and Oklahoma being good in Big 12 basketball till the cows come home, but that doesn't mean anything. Because in 5 years from now, or 4 years from now, they're gonna be in the SEC. So that has nothing to do with the SEC with the Big 12. Excuse me. You know, Oklahoma State, I think they've been pretty good in basketball, but like BYU, they're a team that they get a 7 or 10 seed every now and then. Jimmer Fredette was the last time they were like super good, and that was how long ago? But when's the last time BYU has been a top 25 basketball team? You know, maybe they were in for a few weeks, but I just don't see it. I don't see how BYU adds anything for basketball, right? And BYU is maybe one of those teams who say, oh, they add something for football to the Big 12, but okay, I mean, that's fair. But basketball, I don't think they add too much. Houston, all right, Houston last year, they were a 2 seed. They got to the Final Four despite almost losing to a 10 and 12 seed. And before that, I think they were a 4 seed a few years ago, and you know they were they've had their good years, right, for sure. And so I think Houston, I can get behind Houston being good for the basketball side of things, but the last time that Houston was truly dominant. Right, and I understand that Houston made the Final Four last year, and maybe this is the start of Houston being really good. Maybe this is the start of Houston, being dominant in the American Athletic Conference, and maybe as they go into the Big 12. Right, I'm not saying that that's not a possibility, but the last time that Houston, over a stretch of time, was really dominant was what, 5 Slamma-Jamma? So, like, I mean, and again, maybe this is the start of them being really good over a 5-10 year stretch. I'm not saying that couldn't be it, but is their dominance because they were in a lower, like in a less in a weaker conference? I don't know. Time will tell. If they get into the Big 12 and they start, you know, if they give Kansas and Baylor a run for their money and they look like they could win the Big 12, then maybe I'll say, okay, all right, fair enough. Touche, Houston, you're good. UCF, they're bad. They're not. Let's just say UCF isn't being added to the Big 12 for basketball. UCF being added to the Big 12 is definitely, definitely for football. The last time they were really good at basketball was a couple years ago when they were a 9 seed, and the only reason that they were any good then, I think, is because they had like the biggest guy on the planet. They had, I don't know how tall he really was, but what, the 8-foot Taco Fall guy? And they still didn't make it to the Sweet 16. They still weren't a top 25 team. So, I don't know. I understand if you want to say, hey, being added to the Big 12 helps you with recruiting and you're going to get better from that standpoint. But I don't know about all that because, you know, we say that, you know, I said that the Big or the adding weak teams to the Big 12 devalues the conference, and people say, oh, there's weak teams in every conference. Yes, there is. And I understand that those weaker teams still do get the occasional good recruit. They get the occasional guy, the star guy. They get a good recruit every now and then. But you look at teams over the recent years, let's see, who's been really bad in basketball? Wake Forest, I guess you could. Well, no, Wake Forest was No, that was Georgia Tech. Wake Forest hasn't been great in basketball. Who's been their big recruit over the years, other than I think John Collins, right? And even that was a few years ago. I'm just thinking SEC, right? Weak teams in the SEC. Shoot, Missouri, I guess, right? I mean, but like there's like teams. We all know. Like I can't think off the top of my head because it's not basketball season right now, so I'm not dialed into being all about basketball right now. But the point is valid. Every Power 5 conference has weak teams, whether it's football or basketball. But okay, so now all of a sudden adding a team who is not good in basketball to a Power 5 team is going to make them good because of recruiting? No, I don't think so. Because if that was the case, then every weak team in the Power 5 for basketball would be getting a decent amount of good recruits, and that doesn't happen. Right? And I understand you take those teams, you take the players off those teams and those recruits off of a Wake Forest or a Penn State or whatever, and you put them on Norfolk State, just for sake of argument. I understand maybe, okay, they're going to be good now, right? They have a good team. But that is proving my point. You take the recruits off of a weak Power 5 team and you put them on a team in a no-name conference, right? Stony Brook, whatever, right? Just for sake of argument. All of a sudden they're going to win that conference. Well, yes, because it is a weak conference. That's my point. So now you take a team like UCF, who hasn't necessarily been the greatest in basketball. I mean, they've had a good year here and there, right? But who doesn't? Every team has a good year here and there. Put them in the Big 12, and now, okay, all of a sudden, are they supposed to be? They're supposed to get good just like that? I don't think that's how it works. BYU in basketball, excuse me, my bad. They're in the West Coast Conference, which means they play St. Mary's and Gonzaga as their toughest games. Other than that, you got Pepperdine, Pacific, and who else is in the West Coast Conference in basketball? I don't know because it's a weak conference. So we're gonna take them and put them in the Big 12. All right, fine. Houston, American Athletic, as I said, they've had good. They've had good years. I can understand it, but those teams' conference titles don't mean too much to me. The competition is nowhere near the level that Power 5 is, and like I said, my point is, are we just gonna let any team who beats Power 5 teams or wins their conference championship, are we just gonna let them be a Power 5 team? Like I said, Memphis, okay, let them in. Dayton was probably arguably the best team in the country a couple years ago. Put them in the Big East, sure, or the Big 12, Big 10, whatever. Let them in, right? Boise State, Memphis, Utah State, let them in. Let them all in. Let every single team who's had good years, let them in, right? Because if that's the argument we're going off of, let them in. Just let them all in, right? So I don't get it. So I think it's just because those are the teams that got the invitation. So we're hearing, oh, here's why that they got the invitation, right? But you notice how nobody's making a case for the teams that didn't get an invite. And I can't remember if Memphis got an invite or not. But you notice how nobody's making the argument for Western Michigan to get in, or Wyoming, or Boise State, or Utah State, or San Diego State. Nobody's making that argument because they didn't get the invite. So people say, oh, there must be a reason why they didn't get an invite. No. The reason that those four teams, Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, and UCF, the reason they got those teams, the reason that those teams got the invite, it's not because of competition. It's because of this. And you're on Twitch, you see what I'm doing. Money. The reason that they're doing this is not because of competition. Do not get that fooled. It's because of the moolah, the money. Cha-ching. Money talks, and you know what walks. It has nothing to do with anything else than money. That's it. It's money, and that's it. That's why Maryland moved to the Big Ten, right? It had nothing to do with competition, right? And the presidents and the athletic directors, sure, they'll stand up there and say, "Oh, we think this is going to be very good for our competition, and we think this is going to be so good," right? That's just garbage that they say to make you think about that. That's just garbage that they say so that you believe why they did it, so that you think that you think that's the reason, take a deep look into all the money and everything that they're getting, right? Maryland didn't get that new facility until they got to the Big Ten. I don't think they get that facility if they're in the ACC, because ACC's football isn't the toughest around, right? Other than, I mean, when Maryland was in ACC football, like Florida State was really good, and Clemson was good, and North Carolina was okay, and Virginia Tech was good. But that's 4 or 5 teams, right? And now it's even worse. Now it's Clemson, Virginia Tech, and North Carolina, and I think Miami's overrated, so I'm not even talking about Miami, right? They almost lost to Appalachian State. And I don't know. I need more from Miami to prove that they're a contender in the ACC. But Texas and Oklahoma, there's a reason why they're leaving for the SEC, and it has nothing to do with competition as much as they say it does. And I mean, even actually, because like Maryland's a basketball school, and the ACC is really good in basketball. At least it has been over the years. Texas and Oklahoma leaving, right? That I can understand how that is for competition, right? But because I mean, the SEC is better than the Big 12. Nobody's going to debate that. At least I hope not. But if it did nothing for their pocket, if it did nothing for their checkbook, I don't know that you see Texas and Oklahoma leave, right? Because especially since they're like the founding members of the Big 12, if it doesn't do anything for their pocket, if it doesn't do anything for their wallet, I don't think you see them leave. You know, because right now it's all about money, and you know, I don't know if it always has been, but it has been for quite some time. Being in a conference and moving to a different conference is all about money. That's why, again, Colorado leaves for the Big 12 or the Pac-12. Nebraska leaves for the Big 10. Missouri leaves. Texas A&M leaves. Think about how much more money that those teams are getting right now, being in a conference other than the Big 12. They're getting a lot of money, hands down. No, I mean, go look at it, right? And it's for every conference. Like Rutgers, I know they didn't leave the Big 12, but Rutgers goes to the Big 10. Louisville, Syracuse, Pitt goes to the ACC. West Virginia goes to the Big 12. Like, that's a step up for them, and I think you could make the argument that they should be in the ACC or Big 10. But it seems like the Big 12 over the years has been used as a stepping stone to getting into a real Power 5 conference. Like the Big 12, and that's why you're seeing the Big 12 is inviting these 4 teams in. It's not like the ACC is going to cut their throat to get UCF. The Big 10 isn't going to beg for the Big 12. The Big 10 is not going to beg for Cincinnati to go to their conference, right? The SEC is not begging for Houston to arrive, because the SEC is going to have like what, 30 million teams, right, by the end of it. But you know, not only do those conferences that I just mentioned, do they have enough teams, but they have a good flow of money, and they've got good competition. There's no reason for them to alter anything, except the SEC, I think, just wants to rule the NCAA.